True or false, those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. Hey everybody, welcome to The Whole Truth, where I am taking you through the entire Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation without skipping anything. So if that sounds good to you, make sure that you reach down and hit the little subscribe button below. And don't forget, you can go over to thewholetruthbiblestudy.com, and there you will find all of the videos in one location. If you're listening to this on a podcast, the reason for the pause is because I turned on this cool light. Now I turned it off. Now I turned it on. Now I turned it off. Turned it on. Well, on. Okay, you get the idea. Anyways, and plus, I just think life is better with sound effects. So, you can do sound effects without whoa. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm done with the light. I won't do it anymore, except maybe in other videos. But for today, I'm done playing with the light. But I just think the neon is really cool. So anyways, Deuteronomy, that's where we are today. The book of Deuteronomy. We have finally made it to the fifth book of the Bible. So it's a big deal for me in a lot of ways. Number one, because I actually started this journey 3 years ago. For me right now, it is middle of December 2023. And I started this whole journey in 2020. And granted, I had some tragedy in the middle of all of that, starting this video series, and I'm continuing it. I want to finish this video series, and I'm going to go all the way through the Bible. That's my goal. Lord willing, I'm going to finish this video series and go all the way through to the book of the Revelation and teach all the way through. But it took me a little while to get here, so it's really exciting to finally be getting to the book of Deuteronomy, to teach through the book of Deuteronomy. This whole thing started because I wanted to teach through the entire Bible. And I was talking with my late wife about that, unbeknownst to me at the time that she would be my late wife. But I was talking with her about it actually for about 2 years. And I was trying to figure out a platform to make this happen. And I was thinking through in-person things. I was thinking of okay, do I use the church stage? Do I, have some sort of a morning Bible study? That was really my original plan, was to have an hour-long morning Bible study where I just read through the Bible, read through whatever portion I could read through. Say I would read for, 15 minutes or whatever, and then I would just go back and teach all of those things that we just read through, and then basically read through the whole Bible and teach through the whole Bible in hour-long sessions, and just do it Monday through Friday every morning at 6 a.m. or something like that. That was kind of my idea. People would come and I would just do it in person, and that was just impractical. I have a life. I have kids. I had a full-time job outside of the church at the time, pastoring the church, still teaching Bible studies on Sundays and on sermons on Sundays and Bible studies on Wednesdays, and plus helping homeschool kids and just the whole 9 yards. And so I just didn't have time for all of that. I didn't have time to go and sit down for an hour every single day outside of my house and be obligated to that. So we talked about it for a couple of years, and finally she was for a while, she was encouraging me to start a YouTube channel. She was the one telling me, you should start a channel, put it on. Anyways, I was just talking about it. The Lord was really laying it on me, and it was January 1, 2020, she just took my cell phone and she hit me with it. And she was like, get downstairs, go sit in front of the camera. It's going to be bad. It's not going to look good. You're probably going to stumble over your words. Just get down there and do it. You'll get better as you go. And that's what I did. I literally sat down with my phone. I set it up. I didn't even put it to a computer. I took it straight from my phone and uploaded it directly to YouTube and started The Whole Truth. And so that was 3 years ago. And here we are today, 3 years later, finally starting the book of Deuteronomy. And I tell you that story kind of purposefully because that is what Moses is going to do in the book of Deuteronomy. Let's start out with the title of the book, Deuteronomy. If you were to, I know, obviously, I understand spelled different, but it's a way to help you remember what I'm about to say. Think of duet. If somebody was to sing a duet, then what does that mean? Two people singing, right? It's two. It's the second, the law. It's the second giving of the law. That's what it is. And that's the Latin / Greek, Greek translated into Latin, we get Deuteronomy. The Hebrew is actually a little bit different. Do you remember from the first video of Genesis, or that one that I filmed in 2020, or the first video of Exodus, or the first video of Leviticus, or the first video of Numbers? I've taught you that the Hebrew Bible, they actually titled them differently. Do you remember how they titled them? Leave it down in the comments. You can tell me if you remember. They titled their books by the first sentence in the book. So that's actually where we're going to start today. It's Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 1. These are the words which Moses spoke to Israel on this side of the Jordan, in the wilderness, in the plain opposite Suf, between Paran, Tefel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. Okay, so here we are. We're in the plains of Moab. That's really where we are. We're there in the story. Israel is in the plains of Moab. They are before they get into the promised land. And so on this side of the Jordan, not in the promised land yet, but on the other side, Moses didn't get to go into the promised land. These are the words of Moses. And that's the Hebrew title. These are the words. That's what the Hebrews would have titled it. Some have said that it would be titled The Words because it's from the first sentence. I've seen others say that it's These Are the Words. I don't really know. I didn't pull out my Hebrew Bible. I have a Hebrew Bible right over there, but I didn't pull it out and read it in the Hebrew, nor could I without some special help because I don't read Hebrew that well. I only know that much, and that much is like maybe that much actually. Okay, you get what I'm saying. Anyways, so Deuteronomy is the second giving of the law. And I like the title, the second giving of the law. I feel like everybody that I read seems like, oh, it's translated from this and it really shouldn't be. It should be the Hebrew. The Hebrew's better. I love the Hebrew. I don't think the Hebrew is wrong. I just think that the second law, I could understand hearing second law thinking that there's like another law could confuse you, but it really does tell what's happening in the book, because I need you to remember what happened before. So the recap is this. Israel was God's chosen people from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. The 12 sons become tribes. And Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Hence you have the 12 tribes of Israel. And that all happened in the book of Genesis. And then at the end of Genesis, you land, the people of God, the Israelite people land in Egypt. And that's because there was a famine, but they had a brother that they had sold into slavery, and he had ascended to power from slavery, ascended to power in Egypt, was second in command in Egypt, and actually became their redeemer. And he was this great typology. His name was Joseph. And we end the book of Genesis with all the Israelite people coming into Egypt. And that's how they ended up in Egypt. And then the Egyptian people were scared of them because of how large in number they had become. And so they put them into slavery. For over 400 years, they were in slavery, and God delivers them from that slavery. This is all right at the beginning of the book of Exodus. And so the book of Exodus is God delivering his people out of slavery in this miraculous way. And he used a pretty famous guy to do that, Moses. And that's these books that we're in right now, that we're finishing after 3 years. We're finally finishing. It's the book of Deuteronomy. And so remember that Moses had helped to deliver the people out of Egypt and then taken them to Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai, God was giving him the law. And then you get to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus is the people of God at Mount Sinai, Moses up on the mountain, receiving the law from God. The book of Leviticus there's no movement. What I mean is the people don't go from one place to another place. The book starts at Mount Sinai and ends at Mount Sinai, and it is God giving Moses the law. And so you see all of those laws there. Some of those laws are ceremonial laws. They're about cleansing. Some of them are national laws, how they're going to live. And then you come into the book of Numbers. And when you come out of Leviticus and into the book of Numbers, the Israelite people are now supposed to march forward to the promised land. It had only been about 1 year, maybe closer to 2 years, from the time that they had Exodus, they had left Egypt. And so about a year later, they're supposed to go into the promised land. It was an 11-day journey from where they were at Sinai to the promised land. But remember, they wanted to send in spies. They didn't want to go in. First, they wanted to send in spies. The spies came out. And do you remember that the spies, only 2 of the spies that they had sent in said we should go in? Everybody else said the land is too inhabited. There's too many people. They're too big. There's giants in the land. We can't go in there. So God sent them wandering. They said, oh, that we had died in the wilderness. And God said, if that's what you want, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. God said, if that's what you want, then that's what I'll give you. They said, oh, our children, they'll never make it. Our children are never going to make it. And you know what God did? He literally flipped the script on them. And he said, you all will wander in the wilderness until this generation that refused to go into the promised land, just 1 year or maybe 2 years after they had exited from slavery. And he says, if you won't go in, then you will go die in the wilderness and your children will enter. That's what we had. That's what happened. That's the wilderness wandering. That's the book of Numbers. All the people of Israel wandered through the wilderness for 40 years until everybody that was above the age of 20 that had refused to go in. Now, it was only a few spies. It was only a handful of men that said, don't go in. But then they convinced the couple of million people in Israel to not go in to the promised land. And so God sent them wandering in the wilderness. That's the book of Numbers. And the book of Numbers ends with that generation of people has died off. What does that leave? A new generation. Moses is now 120 years old. By the way, if you're older and you watch these videos of mine, let that be an encouragement to you. You are never too old to start serving the Lord. Moses was 80 years old when God spoke to him at the burning bush, and he is 120 years old when we're reading what we're reading from the book of Deuteronomy. Moses knows that his life is coming to an end, and the Israelite people are going to go forward without him into the promised land. But this group of Israelite people are not the same group that came out of Egypt. It's been 40 years since they came out of Egypt. Since the book of the Exodus, when they marched out, it's been 40 years. And so here is a group of people who did not experience the parting of the Red Sea. And if they did, they were so young, they hardly remember it. Have you ever done that? Do you have memories where you're like, oh, I remember being a kid and we sort of did, like, I kind of remember. You ever been there? Like, that's where these people were. Can you imagine you were 6 years old and your mom and dad grabbed you by the hand and said, come on, we're going. You had no say in that. You didn't know what you were doing. So mom and dad took you. Yeah, you have this memory. I remember taking my hands and running it across the water that was standing up in a wall at the Red Sea. But mom and dad were so panicked, they were pulling me so fast. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what we have in the book of Deuteronomy, is this group of people that have memories. Imagine a guy my age. If it was, I'm 39 years old right now. Could you imagine if what I would be saying? The year before I was born, when my mom was pregnant with me, she ran out of Egypt. That's what we had in Exodus. That's what we had through Deuteronomy. That's what these people are right now. So Moses is going over the law a second time. Do you now see why he's going over the law a second time? Because he is giving it afresh to the people that did not experience those things, at least in a way that they could probably remember. I'm sure some of the oldest people in that group, that would make some of the oldest people in the group right at 60 years old. So some of them might have memories from their late teens of being in Egypt and coming out of Egypt and all of that. But they certainly were not adults when their parents had refused to go into the promised land. That's what the Lord had said. They wouldn't get to go in. So now this new group gets to go in. And that leads us, so that's the title and that's the time. Are you with me? Deuteronomy, second giving of the law, the time, it's 1405 BC. Moses is now 120 years old. And now what do we have? We have this, and the reason, by the way, we also have the reason that Moses is giving it to them. But there's also this, that Moses is telling them their history. He's orally giving it to them, and somebody's copied it down. I know that there are those biblical critics. Hey, can I give you some little inside information? There's 2 types of biblical criticism. There's lower criticism and there's higher criticism. Lower criticism is the good one, thumbs up. Lower criticism says who, what, when, where, how. Higher criticism says, oh, that person didn't write the Bible, even though the Bible says they did, or even though Jesus says they did, or whatever. Like, that person didn't write the Bible and they didn't write it then, and this was put in after. And they call that higher criticism. Examples of why I think higher criticism is thumbs down. Did you like that sound effect? That was funny. The reason that one's thumbs down is because they'll say things like, oh, well, Isaiah didn't write the book of Isaiah. Don't you know Isaiah couldn't have wrote the book of Isaiah? Do you know why they say Isaiah could not have wrote the book of Isaiah? I told you this is a side note. Okay, I'm giving you a little extra here. You know why the higher criticism would say Isaiah didn't write the book of Isaiah? Because Isaiah spoke of a king, a Persian king, like 700 years before that Persian king would ever be around, and used his name, used the king's name. And so, and they're like, that's a Persian name. How could Isaiah ever have known that? He's a prophet. He's a prophet. That's what he does. That's his whole thing. That's his whole thing is to say sayings that are going to come to pass. That's how you know a prophet is a prophet. Okay, anyways, whatever. Higher criticism, lower criticism, ding. You get it? Okay, lower criticism's good. Who, what, when, where, how. That's what we're doing right here. This is called lower criticism. When we look at the Bible, who, what, when, where, how, that's when we're saying, okay, I want to know the context. And that's what we're doing with Deuteronomy. We want to know the context, what is happening in this book and why. And here's the last thing I want to end with is the fact that Moses does not want the people to repeat the same mistake. Do you get that? He doesn't want, he's trying to encourage them. Remember what happened. Here's the law. You're going to need the law. And here is what happened. And I want you to know what happened because I do not want you all to be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Don't be afraid. The Lord is with you. Go into that promised land. Go in because God is with you. He was going to do this 40 years ago, but your parents refused. And so you wandered for 40 years. Now is your chance to fulfill what your parents did not, what your grandparents did not. Go into the promised land. Be fearless because the Lord is with you. And it's not just he wants them to know history for the sake of history. He wants them to know their history so they will love and obey God. Here's the theme of the book of Deuteronomy. Love God and obey him. Remember, Jesus said that in the New Testament. He said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Remember that? Do you remember when Jesus was asked what was the greatest law? And he said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, to love the Lord your God, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And he said all other things in the law hinge on this. Do you remember Jesus saying that? That comes from the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy is a second giving of the law. It's a reminder of their history, but with a purpose. You know, this is the saying that we have in America. You'll hear someone say, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And I agree with that statement. I think it's important to know our history, and I think it's important that we don't repeat those things, those mistakes that were made. I think there's truth to that statement. But here's what I would like to say. I would like to say it in my own way, which is this. Those who don't know the Lord are doomed, period. That's really the point. That's the point that we want to see. Friends, it's not a matter of, I want to know my history so I don't repeat it because I want my country to thrive. No, I want to know my history so I don't repeat it because I want to follow the Lord. What the Lord wants, I just taught a worldview series, and I'm actually going to bring it to the website, to the Whole Truth website. I'm going to bring that worldview series over, and you'll see the sermons. The goal is to put the sermons up on the website of that worldview series that I did, the teaching that I did live on stage, but I'm going to put it with a Bible study, with a printable Bible study. That's at least the goal. I'm sorry it's taken me so long. I'm really trying to get all these things done. But anyways, I'm trying to bring that over to the website. And inside of that worldview study, talking about worldview, like what do you think about science and creation and theology and, you know, our world around us. And so one of those that we talked about, like marriage and government, one of those was history. And the point of that whole sermon, that whole study that I'm going to bring there, that I did, that I've already taught, the whole point of that worldview study about history is that God wants us to see him in our history. He wants us to remember him. He doesn't want us to remember the old things because, the older things are better, or things were built better back in the day, or, things were just better than. I don't know. Like, I challenge that. I don't know that things were necessarily better. I don't think that they're great now, but I look back at things in history and go, those things weren't great either. I don't think it's just a matter of like, things were better back then. I kind of think that's nostalgia. That's my own opinion. Like, I'm getting to an age now where I find my kids listen to stuff. I'm like, that bugs me. Like, don't y'all have some good music? I'm like my dad. I'm like, don't y'all have some good music? Like the good stuff. And then I'm like naming people from the 90s. Like, that was good music. whatever. You get what I'm saying. It's not the nostalgia of, I remember it this way or it's better that way. No, it's remember what God did so that you'll obey and love him. That's the book of Deuteronomy. And so I hope you'll stick with me as we go through the book of Deuteronomy together. The rest of this week, it won't be any more like overview like this. We're going to go through, we're starting with verse 1, and we're going to go all the way through the end of the book of Deuteronomy. And if all goes well, every day you'll have a new video where we'll talk through and teach through the entire book of Deuteronomy. So make a commitment to come along with me. And if you haven't done those other books of the Bible, there's like 700 videos that you can go back to. So go back and go through those other books of the Bible. You won't regret it. Seeing the Bible as a whole paints a whole new picture, and it all makes sense in a whole new way. So I hope you'll come along with me. I'll see you tomorrow.